home 1.5 seconds later. There was a novel in the room, and you're supposed to say an extra kapitel tilum and let him say an extra tile. But apparently we don't always know all the rules. We gratefully acknowledge the gratitude. We acknowledge with gratitude
When that stops, we'll resume our.
The contributions of individuals in memory of others, usually that have sponsored learning here. Among them, a year of learning by the friends of Stephen Vigder, Simcha Melech ben Meir Lev Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka, Isaac and Evelyn Blacher in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Iser, and friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanach Zundel. 2 months of learning by friends of Milton Meller in honor of his 83rd birthday. A month of learning by Charlie Gelfenstein in memory of his parents, Dasi Gittel Bas Meir Levi, and his father, Meir Ben Yaakov. Chaim and Phyllis Reese in memory of his father, Mordechai Ben Yom Tov Lipa, and Isaac and Evelyn Blacher in memory of his mother, Zisel Bas Chaim Yitzchak. A week of learning, Shoshana Berger in memory of her father, Tzvi Ben Shraga Dova Cohen, Susan Fruchter Kramer in memory of her father, Moshe Ben Yechiel Michel, and today is the 2nd of December. Judy and Ari Cohen in memory of their friend Golda Masya Bas Avraham Yosef Halevi, and I don't know, Layla, somebody, and Siggy Bessler in memory of her father, Mordechai Ben Yisrael Yitzchak, and Shala Shudas tomorrow has no sponsor if somebody wants to step up. The topic on the table was, it's not a great word, but I'll use the word discrepancies in the Ksiv and decree, or where there's a word added to a pasuk, or where there's a word in a pasuk, but we leave it out when we lane. Those are all based on Messiah, Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. And we also learned along the way that the Sof Pasuks, Torah is written, if you ever gotten Aliyah, there are no Nekudos, there are no breaks except for the Stumas, they're the big paragraph breaks. So the actual break by Psukim is Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. Interestingly, the chapter heads aren't Jewish at all, they're from the Goyim. But somehow our Chumashim have picked them up. So on the 3rd line of Lamed Ches Amid Aleph, which is where we are, we're going to point out like a super biggie. And what? Line number 3, page Lamed Ches Amid Aleph 38a. Okay, Omer Rav Acha Bar Ada, B'Marava, back in Israel, he was one of the travelers back and forth that brought Torah from Israel to Bavel and vice versa. He told them in Israel, Poskin Lahaden Psuka, the following pasuk, Talsa Psukim. In Israel, they break it into 3 psukim. Now, if you look up the pasuk, the pasuk is what? Shmos Yud Tes pasuk Tes. It has 3 independent thoughts and 2 asnachtas, but it's considered 1 pasuk. But in Israel, they thought it 3 psukim. We actually count it as 1 pasuk, and the pasuk is V'yomer Hashem el Moshe, Hinei anochi bo elecha ba'av ha'anan, behold, I came to you and I spoke to you in a thick cloud. And the pasuk goes on to say, and the people all could hear me speaking to you, and they had faith in you. And Moshe then reported over what Hashem told him to the people. So you could consider that three separate thoughts. And Rav Anan says in Israel, they consider it three psukim. Nonetheless, and even though psukim are Torah l'Moshe Sinai, this discrepancy or this machlokes is reported several times in Shas. Amar Rava Chama Bar Chanina, he says, Lo ha'ashir Moshe ela v'psulton shel luchos. Moshe did not acquire any wealth other than from the collection of the pieces of sapphire that remained after he carved the second set of luchos. So Moshe had this jewelry box full of sapphires. And that's how Moshe became wealthy. Shenemar psulecha shnei luchos avonim kirishonim. God says to Moshe, you carve two more luchos, similar to the ones that I carved initially. And then the pasuk says, Psulten shulacha, that the chips and the broken off pieces will belong to you. Omer Rav Yossi bar Chanina, lo nisna Torah ela l'Moshe l'zaro. He builds on that thought, and he says that that when after Moshe broke the first luchos, the Ribono Shel Olam's idea was hard to understand, but the Ribono Shel Olam's idea was to just give the Torah to Moshe, and he could hand it on to his direct descendants, not to Klal Yisrael. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, Ksav Lacha. So we make a Gezerah Shava, Ksav Lacha, Psil Lacha. Just as it said, carve for yourself, it says, write for yourself. Ma Psiltan Shilacha, just as the carving was done by you and the chips were your property, Af Kasvan Shilacha, so too the writing, meaning the words of the Torah, will be your personal property. And Moshe Noheg Ba Tovas Ayin, Moshe was a generous fellow, v'nosna Yisrael, and he decided on his own, according to this pshat, to share Torah with Klal Yisrael. V'olav hakasuv, and about that the pasuk writes, a pasuk in Mishlei, Omar Tov Ayin Hu Yevoreh. Somebody who is generous of spirit will be blessed, etc. So Meisiv Rav Chisda challenges this notion that the Torah was to be Moshe Rabbeinu's private property. There's a pasuk that says, "I see tziva Hashem b'yeis hahi lomed eschem." The pasuk says, I am commanding you today to teach the Torah to them, meaning to the Jewish people. So according to the pshat that the Torah was Moshe's private property, they darshan that pasuk, I see tziva, God gave the Torah to Moshe, va'ani lachem, and I, Moshe, chose to pass it on. And another pasuk, Roel lamaditi eschem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzaveni Hashem Elokai. So that pasuk, Oisi tziva, God told it, commanded it to me, va'ani lechem, and it interprets that pasuk, this drasha, that Moshe chose to pass it on his own. V'ata kasvu lechem es hashira hazos. But what about the pasuk in Azinu, which is very clear that you can't darshan it any other way, but write this song out and tell it over to the people. Hashira L'chuda. So that this pshat would argue that was a unique, that one little section was supposed to be told to everybody. Laman tehe liya shira hazos le'ed b'nei Yisrael. That is like testimony that in the future, even though bad things happen to the Jewish people, God doesn't abandon us. And everybody had to know that. Ella, so now the Gemara, but that is a little shaky. So the Gemara backs off a bit and it says, no, the entire Torah in terms of the simple pshat and all the rules and the regulations and all the history lessons that it give us Mishalom by which we learn things, those God did indeed give to Moshe. And Moshe was with the instructions to teach it to the Jewish people. But Pilpula Ba'alma, the rules of drasha, the Yud Gimel, the Rabbi Yishmael and all the other rules of drasha, Moshe was supposed to keep to himself, and those he passed on. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shchinaso Ela Al Gibur of Asher V'Chacham V'Anav. The Gemara is making a rule that God does not rest his Shechina Kaviyachal and give prophecy to any individual unless he has 3 or 4 major milas. He has to be wealthy. He has to be brilliant. He has to be strong, wealthy, brilliant, and modest. Okay. Kulon min Moshe, and we learn all 4 of these attributes from Moshe Rabbeinu. Gibor Dichsiv, we know that Moshe was strong because the pasuk says, "V'yifrosh es ha'ohel al hamishkan," that Moshe single-handedly put the furs over the top and the curtains on the krushim all by himself. V'yomer mar Moshe Rabbeinu porsu, Moshe Rabbeinu spread them out himself. V'ksiv, because the pasuk says, Asher, and the pasuk explains, Asher Amos Orech HaKaresh. What did I do? I skipped? Oh, I'm sorry. Eser Amos Orech HaKaresh. Each upright board was 10 amos, which is, depending on your pshat, on who you interpret, somewhere between 18 and 22 feet tall. And Moshe had the strength to throw the furs and the curtains and to attach them all by himself. So Ema the Orech the Kotin. So the Gemara challenges, well, perhaps Moshe was uniquely tall and he didn't need any strength. He could just reach up and plop the furs on top by him without any special throw them up kind of effort. Okay, Ella, but we learn it min hadenkra from a different pasuk, Diksiv, as poish b'shnei haluchos v'ashlichem me'al shtei yedei v'ash borom. Moshe lifted the 2 huge, heavy stone luchos in his hands and threw them down with enough force for them to shatter. These are the first luchos. Okay, so we're going to tell you, haluchos, the dimensions of the luchos were orchin shisha. They were 6 tvachim tall. That's about 2 feet. The rachvan shisha, and about 2 feet wide. The oven shlisha, and 3 thick. 3 tvachim thick, so that the 2 of them put one on top of the other would form a cube to go into the teva. Now these are made out of sapphire. They're very heavy, and yet Moshe was able to throw them down. Now, Asher Psilacha, Sultan, Shilacha, Yehe. So the fact that Moshe was Asher was wealthy is because he had this collection of sapphires. Okay, Chacham. How do we know Moshe was brilliant? Rav Shmuel the Amrei Travayu, they both agree. Chamishim Share Bina Nivra B'Olam. God created the universe with 50 gates of wisdom, 50 levels of comprehension, however you want to interpret that. V'kolam nasnu l'Moshe chaser achas. And he gave 49 of the 50 onto Moshe, so that Moshe could understand almost everything except some details about the Ribbon Shalom that even Moshe couldn't get while still alive. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "V'nischasrehu ma'at melech v'achsarehu ma'at." He held back a little melachim of his knowledge of God. Anav, how do we know Moshe was modest? Diksiv, perfectly simple pasuk, ish Moshe anav ma'od. Okay, so now we have the archetype for Nevi'im. But in order to prove it, you have to show that it was applied, right? I mean, otherwise it could just be theoretical. Amar Rav Yochanan, kol hanevi'im ashirim hayu. All the prophets were wealthy. Minolan, how do we know that? Moshe, from Moshe, Umi Shmuel, Umi Amos, Umi Yonah. We have 3 examples of later prophets who were also wealthy, and you can now expand that to all of them. Moshe Diksiv, Abed Moshe, it says, Lo chomer echad mehem nosati. I didn't take a single donkey from anybody. Now, donkeys were used to carry things. So Moshe had all of this wealth, all of these sapphire pieces. He would need to put them in a box. He would need an animal to carry them. Yet it says Moshe never asked for any single animal from somebody else, meaning he had flock of donkeys on his own. Mi kalo ogra, could that possibly mean a donkey that he didn't pay for? Okay, lafuke man de shakel below agra, to exclude somebody that stole a donkey. So we can't even hypothecate that Moshe might have stolen a donkey. Ella da afilu miagra. Maybe that we have to learn that he had his own flocks. He didn't have to even buy a single donkey. The Dilma mishum da'an. So the Gemara throws in, well, maybe he didn't need donkeys to schlep his stuff because he didn't have any stuff. But we already learned 3 times that he had all these sapphires to schlep around. Okay, so therefore it had to be that he was so wealthy he had his own flocks. Shmuel, what about Shmuel? Diksiv, Hineni, here I am. Anu bi neged Hashem v'neged Mashiach. Please testify on my behalf in front of God and in front of the king, Shaul. As sure me lokachti, I never took an ox, did I ever take? Chamor mi lokachti, did I ever take a donkey? Bechinam lafuke man de shakel bechinam. Again, we're going to ask, could this imply he never took one, confiscated one, but he always paid for them? Ela afilu b'schar. He never even took one and paid for it. He had his own flocks and herds. Dilma da'anihu. So again, we're going to ask him, maybe he didn't need animals to schlep his stuff because he didn't have any stuff. Elamehacha, so we learned that he did have tons of stuff from the following pasuk. V'tshuvaso hamrasa. he returned to Hamrasa, Kisham Beito, because his home was there. So Shmuel was a circuit judge. He would go to various communities and set up what they did and return home. This would be an annual circuit. V'omer Rava, kol makom shahaylech beiso imo. He took everything he had with him. Each time he stopped somewhere, so he needed a bunch of animals to schlep his stuff. Omer Rava.
If you check again Arsto's note, they explain it a little differently.
Okay.
That when they say kol makom shahalach beiso imo, implying that every place where he would stop, he had a residence.
But he had to bring all his stuff with him to fill it.
But by having multiple residences,
That also is a simon of affluence. Okay, I interpreted he needed to carry everything there. That's what he needed the animals for. Okay. Omar Ravo, Gadol ma shenemar b'Shmuel, Yoser mishenemar mimosh. Actually, Shmuel, they said it was a bigger thing they said about Shmuel than about Moshe. The Elu b'Moshe Rabbeinu Kasav, regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Lo chomer echad mehem nosati. He didn't confiscate a single donkey. Vafilu b'schar, even offering payment. The ilu gabe Shmuel afilu b'rotzon lo sachru. But with regard to Shmuel, the pasuk specifically says, even if they wanted him to be able to buy it from them, he didn't. Uksiv, and it says in the pasuk, v'omru lo ashkes akshatanu v'lo ratzinu, etc. Pardon me? V'lo ritzosanu. I didn't confiscate it and I didn't take it by will. Amos tiksiv. How do we know Amos was wealthy? V'ayin Amos v'yomer al emtzalo novi al amatzia novi anoichi. Okay, I forgot.
V'lo ben
novi anochi. I'm not a prophet. I'm not the child of a prophet. Ki bakar anochi ubailem. Ubayles, is that a summit? Ubayles shekamim kiram shikmim kiram demusatargum. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Arimar. I forgot. I'm lost. Let me.
The Targum of Yosef. Yosef was the Targum this pasuk. Hare Mora Gise Ana.
Okay. So you have not Rob doesn't. Okay. Right. Now Amos 16 says about Amos. Yayan Amos answered someone, the Omer, and he said, Lo Amatzia, I am not a prophet. Lo Novi, I'm not a prophet. Anochi, Velo Ben Novi Anochi, I'm not the child of a prophet. Ki Baiker Anochi, I'm a herdsman. Oh, Boiles, and I have forests, sycamore trees, shekakim, sycamore trees. Kidda Targum Rabbi Yosef, as Rabbi Yosef translates into this, Ari Mori Geise, I have a lot of cattle, Anan B'Shakmin Li, and I have forests of sycamores, B'Shafleta on the coast. Okay, so therefore you see Amos was also rich. Yonah Dixiv, with regard to Yonah, we know of that he was also rich. Shieten Schlara V'Yered Ba, he paid for the ship. He paid a fare. The first translation, he bought a ticket to go on the ship, and he boarded the ship. V'Yomer Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan said he didn't buy a ticket. Shenasan Skara Shel Sfina Kula. He chartered the whole ship and he paid for the whole ship. The Omer Romanus, Rabbi Romanus said, Skara Shel Sfina, the charter fee for the ship, Havia Arba'as Alfayim Dinare Dahava was 4,000 golden dinarim. So that's a huge amount of money. So obviously, if Yonah could pay it, he was wealthy. What? What?
I said the price of gold today.
Okay, so it was a very expensive ship that he chartered. Omer of Yochanan, B'schila hayamoshe lame Torah umishkacha. Initially, when Moshe learned Torah on Har Sinai, he tried to remember, but he kept forgetting. And over, Hashem would teach him the Torah, and he would forget it. Ad shenisna lo b'matana, until finally God said, fine, it's yours as a gift, you can't forget it. And that's how he was able to retain the whole Torah. Shenemar v'yiten al Moshe koloso ledaber oti. He told that when God finished talking to him, he handed him the gift, and that was the two luchos. Okay, now we're going back to Nidorim. Okay, v'zones ishto v'esbanav. If there is a neder between two individuals where one of them cannot benefit the other, okay, no matter which way the neder goes, the person who is barred from giving benefit to the other person may nonetheless feed his wife and kids. Even what? Ruvain and I. Ruvain has a family. I make a neder, Ruvain cannot benefit from me. Or Ruvain makes a neder, he cannot benefit from me. One of us makes that neder. I'm not allowed to give even a cookie to Ruvain, but I can provide a banquet for his wife and kids. And now you're going to ask, but just a minute, that relieves Ruvain of the obligation of feeding his family that night, maybe for 2 days if they take home a doggy bag. Right? So the Gemara says, Afopi shehu chayiv b'mizonoson. Even though Reuven has the prime obligation of feeding his wife and his kids. Okay? V'lo yozin es behemto ben tameo ben tahor. On the other hand, I would not be able to give my can of dog food to his dog or my hay to his sheep. Okay, I could not feed his animals, whether they're tameh or tahor, meaning not kosher or kosher. Okay, so and the implication being that's a direct benefit to Reuven, because if you have a cow and you shech the cow, you sell the meat by the pound. So if I feed his cow and his cow gains 2 pounds, he'll get another $6 if it's $2.99 a pound for the beef. Okay, so that's a direct benefit. And according to the Tanakama, that would apply to both kosher and non-kosher animals. Rav Elazar Aimer zon es hatameya ve'eno zon es tahira. What do you do with a horse? You ride the horse. You don't really care how much the horse weighs. So if I feed his horse, that's not a direct benefit to him. But if I feed his ox, it is a direct benefit to him. That's Rav Elazar's position. So the rabbis debate that with Rav Elazar. Amru lo ma ben tamei l'tahira. Why do you make this distinction between kosher animals and non-kosher animals and kosher animals? Amar lahu, he says, Shahatahira nafshel shmayim v'gufa shalom. It's true that the life spirit in the kosher animal is God-given. That belongs to heaven. But the actual body, the weight of the animal is the property of the, quote, owner, unquote. The tameya, but a non-kosher animal, nafsha v'gufa l'shmayim. Since a Jew can't eat it, it's both its body and its soul belong to God, so to speak. So Amr Lo, so the rabbis replied to him, that the non-kosher animal, it's not true that the body belongs to God too. You just have the ability to work it, because he could indeed sell it by weight, because the French eat horse meat, and other animals eat horse meat. She'im Yirtzef, the guy chooses, Harehu Moichra, he could sell it, Lavdei Kachavim, Ulamaichal Laklavim, he could sell it to a goy to eat himself, or he could sell it to somebody to use as dog food. Okay, so now we're going back to the concept of where do you draw the line when you have a neder? And the Gemara makes a very interesting comment. Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Chanina, Omer Rav Huna. Rav Yitzchak, the son of Chanina, says in the name, Chananya, says in the name of Rav Huna, Hamoider Hanama Chaveiro, I make an oath that I will not get benefit from Reuven. Mutter lahasi espito, I can nevertheless give my minor daughter, that's the Havamina, to Reuven to marry. Okay, apparently marriage is not considered a benefit. And I know the fact that I no longer have to feed her is also not applicable. So Havi Barib Zera had a problem with that. Elema Bishenichnesei Avi Kala Asurin Al Hachosin. If we're talking about a vow in the direction that nothing I have can benefit Reuven, so Hare Meiser Lo Shifcha Leshamsho. Whenever you marry your daughter off, you send at least one servant girl along to help her out in the house. She shouldn't be able to wash dishes herself, and he's going to wash the husband's dishes too. So therefore, the servant that was initially mine, Reuven's going to get benefit from.
Where do you get shot that it's sending a servant?
What?
That's what Dagmar says.
It says
Shifcha
a shifcha l'shamsha, a servant girl, a slave girl to take care of them.
Let's double check on its explanation.
Why, in marrying off his daughter, the father delivers a maid servant to serve him. Okay, such an offer is undoubtedly constitutes forbidden benefit. So that's what I said, that he's going to do the dishes and wash the husband's dirty dishes too. Ella bichnise chosan asurin al avikala. So no, we have to switch the neder around. I can't benefit from Reuven, not Reuven benefit from me. So now it's the chiddush is that Reuven marrying my daughter is not a benefit to me, even though I no longer am responsible for her. Gedola mizu amru, but even bigger chiddush. More than that, zon es ishto v'es banav. The person who makes the vow can still feed the other guy's wife and children. We said that in the Mishnah. Afal pi shehu chayev mizon noson. Even though it relieves the person you made the neder about, who is the husband and parent, now no longer has to feed them. Viat amat muter lehesi bobito, and you're telling me that it's a chidush that he can marry his daughter off to them? If he could feed her when he's in her house, and in other words, if he's relieved of the feeding of her, if that's the nature of the netter and the other guy chooses to take her out to dinner, then obviously he can marry to her. There's no chidush. Okay, so we have to change the understanding again. Li'olam shenichse avi kala asurim al hachas. So we have to explain it that my stuff, it's my daughter, and my stuff is forbidden to Reuven. However, bebito bogeres umidaito, the girl is already mature. She's not a katana. We have to change our understanding. Bogeres is technically a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. But
That's a naira.
That's a naira, I'm sorry, a girl over 12 and a half who is already married. In other words, in their world, the 12 and a half-year-old girl was a grown woman. Okay, and she got married. She wants to marry Reuven. I have nothing to do with it. So I have no obligation to feed her. She's an adult. And she chooses to marry Reuven. That has nothing to do with my neder. Okay, and therefore, her marrying Reuven has nothing to do with me, and there's no violation of a net. What? Yeah, but she chose to go. I mean, maybe she has her own property, and she takes that. Or maybe Reuven says, just to thumb me in the eye, I'll marry her without a dowry. But there is like givens, because we said earlier, the servants that are her personal maid goes with her. So she has, to some extent, her own stuff. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa like that. If a person makes a neder not to benefit another person, he cannot marry his minor daughter to him. Aval masihu bito bogeres umidaita, but his adult daughter can marry him of her own free will, and the father does not have the power to stop her. Omer Rav Yaakov, Hamadir beno letalmid Torah. If a man makes the following vow, a little background: a son is mechuyev to do pretty much anything the father wants because of kibbud av. Furthermore, a son has the Torah obligation to sit and spend time trying to figure out what his father may want. And then he has to go and do what his father may want. So if you're doing kibbud av properly, it's so time consuming, you don't have much time for anything else. But the kid's a big Talmid Chacham. So the father says, I waive my rights to you showing respect for me and doing for me, so that I do not, you can't depart from learning. In other words, I'm waiving my kibbud av rights so you can spend your whole time learning Torah. That's the neder. Okay? So nevertheless, mutar mamaloyos lo chavis shalmayim. Nonetheless, it doesn't take much time. So the son could fill a pitcher for the father. Okay? Ulahadlik lo esaner. Or the son could flip a light switch and turn a lamp on for the father, put oil and light the lamp, because those are not sufficiently time consuming that he would be detracting from his learning. Okay, so that's that. Now, Omer of Yirmiyah, Omer of Yochanan. Reb Yirmiyah said, I skipped again. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Rebbe Yitzchak Omer, Salais lo dog cotton. He can even roast a little fish for him. Fry an egg is again a small task that is not significantly detracting from learning. So the son can do that too. So I told my kid he has to make me put a blocks on my bagel for me. It would not detract from his learning. Okay. Omer of Yirmiyah, Omer of Yochanan, HaMoeder Hanom Mechaveiro. I make a neder that I will not benefit in any way, shape, or form from Ruvain. Mutter lahash koiso kos shel sholom. Nevertheless, Ruvain can give me a kos shel sholom. So the Gemara says, my ninhu. What exactly is a kos shel sholom? They translated it a cup of tranquility. That doesn't help me any more than kos shel sholom does. Hache Targimo, here in Bavel we explain, Kos Shel Beis HaAvel, that is one of the cups. If you remember, we once learned that one of the things the people who visit the Avelim are supposed to do is get them drunk. They give them 10 cups of wine to relieve the tension and the sorrow of the Ovel. Okay, so in Bavel they say that Reuven's allowed to visit me if I'm an Ovel and pour wine for me to be one of these many cups. Okay, but in Israel they say kos shel beis hamerchatz. You go to the merchatz, the water is heated, but the air is ambient temperature. So you come out of the merchatz and you're immediately chilled. Those of you who go swimming in the pool may have this experience when the water air is cooler. So they would give the guy who emerges from the merchatz like a cup of tea, a cup of hot water to warm his body. Okay, so you're allowed to give him. So if we're in the merchatz together, Reuven could pour me a cup of tea. That's not sufficient benefit to me, and somebody else will do it if he doesn't do it. So that would not violate the neder. Okay, going back to the Mishnah, we said he can feed the wife and the kids, but he can't feed the animals. Lo zavun es behema bein tamea bein tahara. He couldn't feed, according to the Tanakama, either the kosher animals or the non-kosher animals. Tanya, we have a brisa that says, Yeshua ish Uza oimer. Yehoshua from the place called Uza made a statement. Zon avoda v'shechvaisav kanainis. If there was such a neder between two people, the one who's not allowed to benefit the other, nonetheless, could feed his non-Jewish slaves, both male and female. Okay? V'lo yazon es behemto ben tamea ben tahira, but he could not feed his kosher or non-kosher animals. So why is a slave different than an animal? Now, this is going to be a metaphor. This is not a bloodthirsty statement, so I don't want to see everybody's hand leap up. Okay? My timer, what's the rationale? When you dispatch a kosher animal to eat, the manner of doing it is shchita. There's a ritual slaughter process. You cut the kanaveshet, you hang the animal, you drain the blood, etc., etc. When you dispatch an animal that's not for Jewish human consumption, you do it in the most expeditious manner. You slit it from throat to groin. You cut it open and flay it open. That's a very fast, relatively painless method of dispatching the animal. Okay? So they're making an analogy here. Since human flesh is inedible, if for some reason you were to dispatch a slave, you would not use shchita, you would use the flaying open technique. Okay, and that's what the Gemara says. Avada v'shvoisav kanainim non-Jewish slaves leminachurtza of avidan. They are roy to dispatch by flaying open. Okay, and therefore the concept here is, if you weigh the dead goy's body, doesn't weigh if he weighs 50 pounds or he weighs 400 pounds. There's no benefit to the master of feeding his slave. And that's the Gemara's picturesque way of saying that. But it does not mean you're supposed to go chopping up your non-Jewish housekeeper. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up tomorrow at the Mishnah. And I apologize for my from thing. Kenny, you can slash open my housekeeper. I'll do yours. Since I said you shouldn't do your own.
I have my notes from when the first time we were in.
Yeah.
I wasn't giving the.
Yeah.
And the person explained it a little, they recited as you did, what the direct parallel was, but they explained it very interestingly in another way. That namely, when you dispatch, when you sell a slave, a Canaanite slave.
It's not by weight.
It's not only not by weight, but it's simply with no regard to their separating their family.
That's all, okay. Oh, so that's what he means by tearing apart.
So it's like
I hear. Okay, I think that's a modern.
it could be, but it's an
You know,
interesting.
that's a modern sensibility.
Yeah.
Because even 250 years ago in this country, they sold slaves without regard for
Right.
familial bond.
Right? So Rashi says over there, you know what he says. So the question is, why doesn't it say by Avram and Yitzchak?
Oh, that's because they took everybody with them. There was nobody left behind to be uninfluenced. Abraham took all the souls he was kind of with him every time he moved.